Hello, everybody. I'm your host, Zenitsu, and you're listening to the Digi Talks podcast, the show that covers various news from meta developments and various other topics and everything in between for the fine folks who love the Digimon trading card game. Just as a quick reminder, I generally stream this live over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, and it's also usually uploaded as a YouTube video under the channel of Zenitsu, as well as being on various podcasting platforms like Spotify for your viewing and listening pleasure. So please feel free to leave a rating, like, follow, subscribe, review, depending on the platform that you're actually listening on. It really does help support the podcast. So I know I didn't exactly have an intro. The power went out, so I'm basically doing this from like a remote location. So if I sound a little bit different, I apologize. And if anything was kind of slightly off in terms of production wise, again, I'm doing the best with what I have just to be able to try to get content out to you guys. So, and gals. But today I am with some members of Team Blank, and we are going to basically be discussing what is to come from BT17 because we just got a ban and restriction list, which we'll go into lightly because there's only 1.5 million videos about the ban and restriction list. I have one myself on my channel, so we're not going to be touching up on all of those and going deeper into that. We're just going to be talking about like what's to actually come from this ban and restriction announcement. So and like the meta that's going to be forming because of it. So yeah, the ban and restrictions. But I guess first we should just go into a question of the week. Is what's your number one pick of being the best deck in the format?
I'll start us off. I think Imperial's like very well poised. It didn't get touched. Well, hardly, right? Because they lost Hammer Spark if they were playing it, if they had the room. Otherwise, they're pretty golden, and I think that they're in a great spot because like a lot of trash-based strategies like are still trying to float around, and Paladin mode just kind of says no to that.
For me, I think Magnamon X Blue Base is still gonna be one of the best. Just because the only thing that got hit was your option to go into it for cheaper, which does suck. Don't get me wrong. But other than that, nothing else was touched in that deck. Just the one option.
Yeah, I think basically what it seems like, and kind of the consensus that a lot of people are kind of drawing the conclusion of, is like blue is probably going to be dominating this meta. So like I'm gonna this isn't really a hot one, just to kind of be the different guy. I still think that Ancient Garurumon is going to be a fine deck. Like, yeah, losing 8 Ukamon or going from 8 Ukamon to 5 Ukamon is like a hit in its overall speed and consistency, but it's still a highly flexible deck that has more than enough tools to make up for what it lost, which wasn't a whole lot because you mainly lost Hammer Spark, but if you were pure Ancient, you weren't running a whole lot to begin with, maybe 2. That's what I was running in my initial build, just to have a tiny bit extra memory oomph because you'll need it sometimes. And then you could just substitute the rookies with whatever when it comes to either red or blue base. So again, not that big of a
That's
deal.
the main problem I think at the moment is that due to like Numemon being hit, like a lot of people are like, you probably don't need red base anymore. But then Imperial exists, and you're just kind of like, I kind of need to stay on red base just for Gotsu because I don't have my generic color version of it. Because like you really like if you can stop the partition, like Imperialmon just kind of dies.
I mean,
Like
yes, but as far as like what I noticed, because I was doing a lot of testing on the simulator, the difference between red and blue is actually a lot more apparent than what people think, because red
mhm.
gives you way more card draw and more consistent card draw than blue does. So like blue
Yeah.
is just to have some extra play lines and flexibility on being able to utilize your ancient, because you have the evolution to digivolve into the promo lobo to act as another warp point, but that play, because it's not on attack, it's on Digivolve, requires so much more extra memory, and that's where the Hammer Sparks would have been helpful. So, like, you have to subsidize that with other plays, which is actually
Wait, the
slowing the
promo
deck
Lobo?
down. What?
The promo Lobo or the regular Lobo?
Promo Lobo.
Promo Lobo's I think on swing.
No, Promo Lobo's on when Digivolve. because the promo Aguni is on swing, which is why he's so much better.
That's what it was. Yeah, Aguni was the on swing.
So promo Lobo is on Digivolve, which is still great just to be able to have like instant reactive plays, but you need more memory to maintain turn because it like with the new stuff on how it's interacting with Ancient, it because of the new Kendo, that's turning it into a when attacking. Because you'll swing with you'll swing with BT17 Kendo, when attack draw card, when attack Evo into Lobo, when Evo into Ancient because Kendo is in Inheritables. So it's that's where the when attacking aspect is coming from. So that way you're dealing 2 damage in a single hit. But the fact that Ancient has flexibility is why I still think that it's going to be one of the better decks of the format. But yeah, so kind of kickstarting this into the actual conversation, the big winners and the big losers of the ban and restriction list isn't necessarily going to be like that cut and like it is kind of cut and dry because obviously with Numemon X being hit, you can't reasonably float into Platinum, which means you might have to like change how Numemon functions because of that. But I think Numemon still has plenty of tools to be able to make up for that. And it still has a lot of broken stuff to it because, again, you went from 8 Ukamon to 5 Ukamon, which is still plenty of Ukamon, and now you just have more space to run more floodgates or something else. Like, I think Numemon honestly is still going to be fine. Sure, it technically was a big loser, but it's still better than most decks in the game, even with cards being limited. And that's kind of where Yellow Vaccines also is. Like, losing TK, losing Awakening sucks, like, a lot. And obviously, it's probably one of the bigger losers of the ban and restriction list because, those 2 decks were highly problematic. And I think because they didn't touch on Emissary, you just play more level 5s. And then nothing changes because you still can high roll out of security. You just have to have alternative ways to look at security or just hope it's in there, which Yellow still kind of does. And then the fact that Patamon and Emissary are still things means that you still could just, for one, Evo level 5 into Magnamon X that is either in security or set up through some other means. So I think those are obviously the big losers, but I don't think they're decks to still just completely write and discredit. So what do you guys think is am I missing any other like losers from the ban and restriction list?
Numemon is the obvious suspect. Yellowvax got hit hard. What else is on the ban list?
Because I mean, like, sure, Big Ukamon is a meme that nobody cares about. Losing almost an entire entire Ukamon, but like you still have the search Ukamon, so decks that want to run at least search Ukamon to try to buffer things out. Like that's fine. Like I built a Shakamon deck where it's just like, yeah, you have 8 rookies, like 8 red rookies that draw you card on attack between Guilmon and whatever. I was on Guilmon, and then I was playing like 2 copies of Lunamon just for the raise out, bounce back to hand, or bounce like a level 5 that's just sitting there doing nothing back to hand, just to gain 2 memory to make memory management better. And then the Search Ukamon was the other rookie that I was running as like my combo of rookies. So it's like you still have the Search Ukamon to try to make up for some decks that don't actually have dedicated rookies. And then obviously we have like really good rookies that could help draw in various different bases like red, blue, and purple. Yeah, red, blue, and purple are like the 3 most common ones. So I think like even though it does suck losing 8 Ukamon, I think it's just good. Like if anything, my big takeaway from the ban and restriction list, I was kind of watching Mario's video, and like I honestly think that this was a good start, but that's kind of the problem. It was a good start, which means they're not done. They should have hit more. And that's my only issue with the ban and restriction is like what we got was good, but we needed more because there's just a lot of very unhealthy interactions and unhealthy aspects that are left in the game. Which I guess then leads us to the big point where it's like, I know Mirage is a huge contention talking point, not only because that deck has been like insanely strong for a while, but people just don't like it, and it kind of starting to highlight a lot of problems with Digimon. Same thing with like Fenry, where it's just like you have these big, stupid OTK decks that literally do almost nothing and then just win out of nowhere, usually on like turn 3 or 4 if everything is set up correctly. Takumi Kazuchi could do it as early as turn 2 if they have the right cards in hand. But yeah, like this is the type of aspect where I kind of just don't like Digimon, which is why like I've been leaning towards decks that don't do that. But right now, there's like no real reason not to play that way. Like just build dumb big stack, raise out, kill opponent, game over. Like, because if the best thing is to not interact, those are some of the best non-interactive decks. And I know, like, Mirage has his problems, probably more than Taka in terms of, like, matchups, because, like, Mirage kind of just dies to any good level 5, level 6, or level 7 ace. So it's kind of just funny to think about that, but, like, the fact that Mirage is still one of the most consistent and fastest OTK decks is kind of nutty. And like this goes into why I hate the training cards, because they are specifically the cards that are facilitating this unhealthy play pattern. And it's sad to see people not exactly realize that, but that is just the truth.
I think the problem is that like everybody's just like decided to swallow that pill and realize like this is kind of how the card game has to work now. Where like if you're a deck that can't play trainings, like you just are bumped down an entire tier basically. Like, and that's pretty rough. And then other decks like are down an extra rung because like they're trying to use a mechanic that just isn't feasible in the card game. Like Birds, I think Birds could be honestly a pretty good deck if like I guess before the new like guy that like just ruins your trash setup, right? But before, like you just float into like a million bodies that like gain rush, and while gaining rush, they pop 8Ks, which is most level 5s in the game. So like back when level 6 aces were like your big like threat spot, like you kind of just didn't have to worry about it. But now it's level 7s. We're at the state of the game where we got to worry about level 7 aces, and that gets like even worse come December, right? Where we get the 2 other ones that we're missing.
Yeah, December's where we're getting the LM aces, which include both bond aces for blue and red respectively.
Right, and the red one is actually good. It is like I think it ends up being the best generic red.
Yeah, because Crimson Mode is I think highest DP, either higher or lowest DP.
No, Crimson Mode is up to 15k worth of stats.
Yeah, whereas the Agu Bond Ace is his DP or less. He blows up. So he's not good for wide, but he's still better in general because you can just hard slam, and as well as like if you are at low enough security, you can just throw them on top of Agumons. So like any of the red decks that play Agumons, like have a easy warp into a level 7 on your opponent's turn.
Well, okay. So I pulled up the ace. The ace blows up 14. It's Agumon blows up any number of your opponent's Digimon whose DP equals 14. So Agu Bond can blow wide because it's just any number as long as we add up to 14 KDP, and then when attacking, if you have a red tamer, trash the top card of security.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it just sounds worse than Crimson at that point.
Well, no, because Crimson says.
Well, the big difference is the warping.
Yeah, the 15, the warp, and Crimson says for every 10, trash the top card. So Crimson's better against purple, but
later
if like
games, yeah.
yeah, but like if you're just doing it like turn 2, technically Bond is better just because you miss 1k DP, which could
Well,
not
not you
matter.
don't necessarily, because if you're a deck that has DP in your stack, he gets bigger because
Yeah.
he's based on his own DP.
Yeah, and then you do like again if you have a tamer, which in this metagame everyone should have at least a tamer on board. You trash the top card security because it doesn't specify color; it just specifies if you have the tamer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then obviously the warping aspect where it's just like, oh, this
Yeah,
level
the
3
blue
can
one
be.
sadly suckier because he's based on sources in himself.
Yeah.
I mean,
Because
that's
it's
where
return
the
2 with equal or fewer, and then attacking unsuspend if you have a tamer.
yeah,
Mhm.
that's where the Greymon comes in to act as Agumons.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Like the problem I have with the Goblimon Ace is that it's just it's good in Imperial more, but like you still play Paladin mode. If Mirage were to play this ace, you are in theory just one higher than the 6. So if they're an Exige evolution, they pretty much just beat you outright.
I mean, the idea is like, hey, it gives you a possible out to them getting rid of your Digimon, so that way you could be like, I'm gonna ace it, and now it potentially isn't gonna die, and it can screw you over. Sure, I lose my Mirage, but if it's winning you the game because they can't deal with that type of a play, because you're just going to be stuck with a level 6 sitting on the field anyway. So it's just like it gives them an extra opportunity to do something else with the Mirage that's still threatening just for the Mirage being out.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, that's coming in December, and right now they're probably not going to be playing Paladin Ace. I don't think that card's that great for Mirage, respectively. Right now, it's definitely like Imperial and what's its face, Magna. Like those are probably the decks that are going to run it because it's like more in engine because VMon and free.
Trash all cards.
Yeah,
No.
it doesn't do anything like insane reactively.
It,
It's just a
it's
good.
crazy if it sticks. If it sticks on the board, it's insane. But yeah,
Yeah.
otherwise, it's whatever. Like you can just like muck up a couple of plays because you hurt everything's inheritables.
Yeah.
But other than that, yeah, it's not doing anything too crazy. But like the fact that it just completely hoses like the existing purple strategies right now is fairly big.
Yeah, and Demon Lords right now is the biggest purple deck, and this basically will wipe them from the face of the planet. In terms of like being more meta viable, because obviously it seemed like the intention of this ban and restriction list was to slow down the game. They're completely accomplishing that goal for some specific decks. Kind of like what we were alluding to before. Some were borderline untouched, Imperial being one of them, and Imperial, if you literally just have a single Davis and Ken on the field, that's all you need. Like, that card can single handedly win you the entire game. Like, it does so much work to set you up to make the deck basically move for 1 to 0 memory to go all the way up and to make any of its plays possible. It's absolutely mind-bogglingly crazy. And I think like that's unfortunately the contention point of where the meta is going to be is how much damage out of nowhere can I do if some of the better like not really control but better like stally decks aren't necessarily going to be able to be as present, or like wall decks or something along those lines. If those types of decks aren't going to be present, what do we have left? Just how blitzkrieg combo can we make ourselves?
Mm-hmm.
Because as we just listed, like three of the top decks, which are all blue decks, and then by contention, Takami Kazuchi, which by the time you're Takami Kazuchi, that's the turn you're going to ideally either be breaking all of their security, giving them zero hope, or winning the game on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
They could do that all in themselves because of the Evo chain on discards. So like these are all decks that are showing they're just big dumb combo decks that don't really give a whole lot of time to respond, let alone react.
Yeah.
But maybe
That's
we'll
the
see
thing is,
security control then. I don't know. Like instead of demon
I
lords.
don't think so.
No.
I don't think it does enough because like everything is doing like trash security effects. Like that's how I beat the SecCon is with birds, like just trashing their security via Garuda X inheritables.
You got a point there. Because I think like the
Mhm.
only one that kind of doesn't hardcore just lose to security control, or like out of all of those decks that I just listed, the only one that actually does lose to security control is Mirage, which if Mirage already loses to aces, then he already has other problems with him. So, and like that's the big thing on like why I think like this anti-Mirage hype is like actually like over exaggerated, is because he does have more obvious weaknesses than some of the other decks. But I get why that he's a strong deck still. And I'm not saying this to defend him. I'm just saying it because it's true.
Yeah.
But as
I
far
think like
as
SOC, like proper SOC with the Doro stuff, like I think that deck is situated pretty well, but like there's a couple of like funny matchups where it's gonna struggle, and it already loses to like blue base removal, where if you're just not getting deleted, like you lose. Like Nikki's been struggling with testing it into Mass Day.
Yeah. Masty eats decks alive just because Masty Ace exists. It is rough, bro. Like, the worst part is because, like, the only thing that I think counters it is Kongu. Kongu says we can't recover, right?
yeah, Congo says cards can't be added to security.
Security, and then you can't attack with 7 or less. So, it's like the only thing that could help. Yeah, cards can't be activated. It's like, this is the only card that would make like Dex needs against Masty. Assuming Masty just bullies Dex into the ground, like how Magna was eating, Nume was eating Magnas earlier.
Yeah, but I think like that's just a like because Doru also struggles with a lot because I was also testing black versus purple based. Spoiler: purple base is infinitely better, which to me is the more boring way to play because you're just basically a bad Fenrir Lugamon deck at that point, or like
The
you're
exception is
So I think the thing that
new
you're
rookie.
saying is it's better for playing your tamers. That's what you mean, because
Yes.
black base is all around stronger because its ability to control the board actually equates to you doing damage. So like sure, you're able to do a check, right? So you attack and you force him to collision, and then you're gonna unsuspend because you killed the guy,
Yeah.
and then you're gonna do an alliance and get your 2 checks that way. But sometimes you had to do an alliance to get higher up because the Luga pieces don't give you DP the same way that the other deck does. So like, because if you're on your like SR Doru, that guy gives you 1k DP, which could be the difference maker of you swinging in with collision. You smash through somebody that you would have traded with or died to, and then you still get your piercing check, and then you get whatever other checks you get.
Yeah.
And then you have like a warp rookie. You get a rookie that lets you draw and gain memory just by playing your tamer, which because you're a mind link tamer, you can do funny plays where like you'd end turn, but you play your guy out and you steal back the turn.
Yeah, because it seems like
As
that
well
rookie.
as he's all turns.
Yeah, because that rookie seems like it's designed to be the revive target off of the.
Well, not to mention, I figured out why I was failing against Masty, and then the counter for it. There was a ruling that East pilled me on. The Digivolve is optional. How
Yeah,
many
so
steps we go?
Digivolve's always been up to. Most people just don't think about it, but it can matter.
So you Digivolve the Masty by 2, leaving it at a 5, and then you kill all 5s on board.
Yeah.
That is the way to counter it. Because I didn't know that was a thing. Because the Digivolve for me has always been like death, like ultimate flare. Like you don't stop until you're a 3 or under. I didn't know you had the option of just like, yeah, I'm just gonna do one. Just Digivolve one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
most
Digivolve 2 because you're an ace. So I'll Digivolve you from your 7 to your 6 to your 5, and then I'll blow everything up.
So so all that the base change does is like purple lets you play AGs out like for super free because they come out of trash as well as out of hand,
yeah, and
and
there's more
Kosuke's only can
AGs.
come out of hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's more AG name, but like it doesn't realistically matter because the AGs do the exact same thing, so they're kind of whatever. Like, and Kosuke gives piercing and blocker, right? As opposed to
Yeah.
AG gives alliance and blocker. So like, they
Yes.
both give a blocker, which is still good, but like I was saying, piercing ends up being better because you can use that more often, like with your single stack, as opposed to like having to worry about, because the problem becomes is that you don't have the same means of like just keeping a body just randomly like there at your side as like the other deck does, because you don't have like soul to like give you a free random body to like need use for alliance because your opponent like messed up and didn't give you a small enough body to kill,
Yeah. And I think
and you can't play Demon Castle as easily.
And I think like where Doru, like Dextoru Goramon is for the meta is pretty decent because there's a lot of like really important tamers. But I think like in terms of tamer removal, the deck is kind of slow at doing it. So that's like my only real issue because I do think it has a lot going for it. To be meta relevant and meta competitive, and arguably one of the stronger decks because it has good flexibility between black and purple base, even though I feel like purple base is more consistent and a little bit faster. The trade off is obviously you're not necessarily going to be as, you don't have as high of a ceiling, but I guess sometimes that doesn't necessarily matter, as we've seen with a couple of other decks where it's just like, yeah, what's it? God, I'm blanking on the Ragnarlord. Ragnarlord can have an absolutely insanely high ceiling in terms of the ability to use the deck, especially if like you use the starter deck one to try to like DNA crisscross and whatever. Even though you're not really doing that, you're mostly just looping a big stack, DNAing end of turn, blitz swing all their security away. Like it can have is that insane high that could basically win you the game on the spot, but the consistency as the trade-off is generally a lot lower.
Yeah, which is funny. Because just to end the Lugamon thing, my Dex Lugamon build, because of Honcho's words, is running one Lugamon and one Dino Beamon.
I mean, Dino
just
Beamon's
because
still good.
Well, it's the argument of if you have Luga in trash, you can in theory tuck AG on your 5, or if you like redirect the attack with your 5 because your attack target is switched and or you inherited your tamer. You only need to be SOC in name for the egg to trigger, so you can go into your Luga in trash, and then Luga spits out your Tyranno and your purified Darugas on the board, and then you technically blow up the ace because you would have up to level 6 blow up potential. And then you Dino B and then Kodako go for game and all the junk. But like I'm pilled on it just because I'm like, yeah, I kinda just want like another 6 that like I can go into and kinda just run the game, because it doesn't matter if you pass like going into the Fenrir, because like, oh, I'm leaving you with 1 memory. Cool, I don't care. I'm at your turn officially doesn't start until I'm at 3 now. And if I choose to, I can keep this shit going because I can swing, tap myself out. At the end of your turn, I'll play AG from like the stack. Oh, I gain a memory. I'm back up to 2 memory, so I can do like 1 more action.
Yeah.
Which is hilarious. But Ragnar is really piece reliant right now in this meta. It's really because I was trying it like Ragnar in theory could farm Imperial, but it just comes down to 2 things. You need to find your pieces quickly, and they need to swing on you, on Dragon or anything, because the moment they swing on you, you're unaffected going into your 7. But if they dual tamer Imperial on your 1 stack, you will lose everything, because as far as I think, Bry still doesn't protect you from all card effects. It just protects you from Digimon card effects on the turning Evos.
Bry, I think yes, gives you Digimon protection. I think old ST Bry did give full immunity to Ragna's on opponent's turn.
Yeah, but most of the time they could just counter the ace, like before it
Well,
even
no.
comes in.
You can't because of rules text, and
So
it's by Digimon still.
No, like
So
you,
it's
you could source
oh,
you
okay.
could source strip them to make it more manageable before they can
Mhm.
ace.
Yeah.
Well, the problem is that as long as they have the Brywin, any Brywin, they don't fall into the same trap where like, oh, I blast DNA'd, so I've done a Digivolve by effect. So Dragon, even if you force go into fighter, like, and they just have like whatever amount of sources, they're immune to your Digimon effects, so you just can't like out them anyways. So
Yeah.
like, so if you do it on your opponent's turn, like, that's where you messed up. But that's entirely how that deck is. So like, as long as you can like police them so that you don't have to worry about it, it's kind of whatever.
Yeah. It's also the rule, like the ruling I didn't know because we looked up the Digimon rules text to just figure out how the ruling goes. If you swing at like the Bry, and they blast DNA, your attack fizzles.
Yeah.
So they don't even have to resolve their effect. Your attack just disappears because the original target of your attack no longer exists because the DNA is a new evolution. So if you swing at like say Lady Devimon and Masty, when they do DNA and then say like Kongu is up, you don't go into security. Your attack just disappears because your original target is gone now.
Yeah, because the
Which
Digimon's
is
counted as a new Digimon.
Well, but that depends on certain factors, right? So like, if you are, because it sounds like you're Doru in that scenario. So if you have collision, they have to block you with the newly formed Masty.
yeah, with the new one. But like assuming otherwise, like assume like you're just swinging with like a random like red whatever.
Uh huh.
Your attack fizzles. Like even if you had higher
Yeah.
DP, anything else, it's like your attack disappears, and then like I don't even have to DNA block you.
Mhm.
Just because your attack's gone, so I don't even have to block you here.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't know that you didn't know that until that night.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think like knowing those niche interactions is fine and dandy, but I honestly don't think Ragnarlord is going to be that great in this current meta. Like I think he's just going to be too slow and he doesn't interact enough with the opponent because like a lot of the best decks just do stuff out of nowhere for almost nothing. It's just like, yeah, I can Ancient Guru for 2. Like you don't have like Ragnarlord doesn't have a play for that. It's just like, yeah, I could just not attack and then I could just Ancient Guru out of nowhere for nothing and then just blow you all up. Like, because it just doesn't matter. So, like, I'm forcing you to try to ace, and then if you don't have enough pressure with your ace to be able to close out the game in literally 2 to 3 turns, which sometimes they actually don't, then I like those decks just play to the out of just waiting for
Well,
their opportunity to do that. Because the Ancient Guru also uses like options and they have other types of removal. And then the same thing could be said with Imperial. It's just like, yeah, that you could take your time building up your stack and raising to be able to think about doing stuff. Meanwhile, I just played a tamer turn 1 and then I'm off to the races turn 2 and next thing you know you're already at 2 security staring lethal in the face and you can't do a thing because you're still in your level 4 and you know you're not Ragna, so you don't have protection. And then Mirage and Fenry both just OTK, so they just completely ignore your game plan entirely. And yeah, that's kind of it.
I mean, Mirage kind of does lose to Ragna in the sense that like your first spot at removal is your 6 to remove 5s. So if they're on a 6 already, like there's nothing you can do.
No, you just
You have
wait.
to, yeah, you have to give up an attack
No,
to
like that's what
go
they
into
do.
burst
Like
early.
the smart players will play around the ace
Yeah.
and give up on attacking until and they'll try to bait you into an ace play and then out your ace play.
Uh,
Like the main thing is that like if they show you Bry, you're stuck. You're just stuck. Like depending on where you are in the game. Say if they show you Bra, you're just like, God damn it, I gotta wait. But if they show you like Durand, you can in theory just respond to it because the only thing that Durand can protect itself with is Raiji, but Raiji's by battle. Raiji is not what I
No,
thought it was.
No, Raiji's by
no.
basically everything.
Raiji's if you would leave the
Yeah.
battle area.
But I mean, like this is I don't necessarily think Ragnar's still going to be that great. Like talking too much about
No,
Ragnar
it
is
hasn't.
very
It
irrelevant
hasn't
in my
done too much.
perspective.
It
Yeah,
has not done too much.
I
No,
also want to
you're right.
correct you just for a second. When this Digimon would be deleted other than by one of your effects, by trashing Legend Arm, prevent the deletion. It doesn't protect by being removed from the board.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because
Translation error, I think is what we had it last time.
Okay.
yeah, because like thinking about where the EX meta was, Ragna sure was like in the top 10 decks, even though it was realistically a 6-deck format with Numemon, Armor Vaccine, Imperial, 7 Great Demon Lords, Magna, and Mirage being the actual top 6 decks that actually had good results. And then like looking at BT17 as far as like what we got in terms of like new decks, I think like Dexter Gora is way more competitively viable than Ragna. I think Demon Lords kind of gets hit. Dexter kind of also gets hit a little bit just because now more attention is going to be on Imperial. And then
Well, you win that if you don't get like put into funny little traps. Like if you can just avoid certain things, because all of your removal is like you battled that guy, so they don't partition out. So like you can like actively remove stuff, and then if you eat their tamers, because the tamers, aside from the like couple of times, right, like that they need to gain the memory back, the tamers are left unsuspended, so you can just eat the Davis and Kens, and then they don't really have anything else that they can do.
well, if they set up 2 Davis and Kens, then you're still kind of SOL because the deck doesn't have good tamer removal outside of doing it once.
Yeah.
And that's
Well,
like the
I think
big
both
problem.
sixes eat tamers, if I'm remembering correctly, right? Or just the main six eats a tamer.
The main
it's
6
the
eats a
decks.
tamer, and that's it.
Okay.
You'd have to run a removal option, like
Oh,
the new one that
their
he got.
Dorodin option.
Yeah, to
Yeah,
remove
eats a
another
tamer.
tamer.
Gotcha.
Outside of that,
Okay.
you're not touching the tamers at all, and that could be a huge like problem point. And
Yeah.
I don't remember if Imperial the option lets you play tamer from trash either.
No, it does not.
Yeah, but I
The
mean, at
option
least it
just lets
still can
you
play one out of security. From hand.
No, it does actually. It's hand or trash, so actually it's kind of super good.
Yeah. Okay. So, there you go. Like, because a lot of these good decks outside of literally Mirage, like,
Wait, hold on, wait. What option are we talking about? Are we talking about the Ancient
Return to
Guard?
the Primogenitor.
yeah,
No. This doesn't play tamer. It's security, yes,
yeah, the
but not
security
in like
effect
the
does.
active.
That's the point that I'm getting at. So even if they deleted your
Eat your
tamer, you still have another way to
you
get
can
it
just
back.
get it back from trash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because like being able to use the trash is still like insanely important because a lot of these like I'm just gonna be labeling it the 4 dogs. Like yeah, the 4 dogs in Imperial, I guess. They all have the like what they're doing is they have relatively good speed, relatively good consistency, very highly adaptive game plans on top of the like if their tamers ever leave, most of them have ways to be able to get it back. And like that's kind of like the key aspects of where this meta is like if tamers are removed, like the best tamer, like the best decks that utilize tamers have ways of getting it back to the point where it just actually doesn't matter. So, because that's literally half of Ancient Guru's shtick. Now we see that AG has we have more AGs, which means that there's more opportunities to be able to bring it back with Lugumon because Lugumon's hand or trash as well. And then Progenitor, obviously out of security is the only way you're playing it, but that's still something's better than nothing. And the fact that they have the BT16 tamers like extra broken. But like I honestly think like outside of those 4 decks, I really can't think of anything that's like absolutely absurd. Like there's other strong decks, like don't get me wrong, that's not exactly where I'm going with this. It's just I think those 4 decks are going to be making up and defining the majority of the meta. Like I still honestly think Armor Vaccine for yellow is still playable, slower but playable. I think that Numimon's going to adapt and that's going to still be playable even though those were affected by the bans and restrictions. But like really outside of those 2 decks, I don't necessarily think anything else was really hugely impacted that's really going to be like absolutely changing and warping the meta landscape. Like I honestly even still think like red hybrids, whether you're playing ancient or emperor, like red hybrids still looks to be pretty good, and actually because of less armor vaccine and less numemon, it might actually be better because now there's not as many walls for it to need to scale, which makes its removal type a little bit better, especially since the fact that it also has access to raid now. So it could still like swing, raid, piercing into your dude, big numbers, big damage. But like I think this meta is going to like it's so weird because they slowed down a couple of like some of the most degenerate decks, but still some of the better decks are going to be like incredibly fast. And I think like that's the big problem with this ban and restriction list is that's why I feel like they didn't do enough. And I know a lot of people were hoping Mirage would get hit just because like yes, there is a new Mirage loop. I don't know how consistent that setup is. Let alone how good it actually is at the end of the day.
It's not that great because if you build your deck to do it, that's kind of all you do.
I mean, you're still a Mirage deck. Like, you can still just go up into Mirage and do Mirage things. You just don't have the OTK potential. So you're, like, gonna
Well, you
shift to more
still,
of a
because
lockout
the deck
strategy.
still plays like one of each of your Thomases. You still have that, and you still play like burst modes and crap like that. But like the main thing is that like a lot of your stuff is focused on getting that done. So like all your deck really does is you turbo into Mirages, which is what like the Galaxy engine has done since like the conceit of it. But then because you're not playing your tamers at like the right numbers or like really focused on like certain aspects of it, you're just kind of banking on doing the loop because now you're running like 4 homers that like are do nothing cards if you're not looping.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I've put it together, that's a lot of the times what happens is I'm staring at all these like goofy tamers in my hand, and I'm just like, cool. Like, sure would be nice if I was actually drawing a piece, or one of these guys had the name so that I could burst right here.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. People are still gonna try it. Like, because this isn't the only infinite loop that they technically have left in the game, because there's still the Dimension Scissors with Waru
Or
Seedramon.
Seedrew.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
that's still in the game, and probably like, and the funny thing is because Shoto is going to be coming out next set, like that loop
Mm-hmm.
technically gets easier to use because you have one of the best, most generic green tamers in the entire game. Not saying like that's going to
Yeah.
be like the next S tier deck or whatever. I'm just saying it's funny that that loop gets better next set because of the most one of the best tamers in the entire game.
Mm-hmm.
Cause like right now, I honestly like I really almost honestly think that this meta doesn't really change much outside of like a couple of shifts compared to last meta. Like I think it might be a little bit more open just because there's more decks that are able to like do extraordinarily stupid things and move incredibly fast and be highly consistent. But I'm sitting here and I'm just trying to think like does X deck, like, because I'm relating kind of everything to, like, how does it do against Imperial? Because I do think Imperial obviously is one of the better decks. It's like, how does X deck do against Imperial? So, like, I have a couple of friends at locals, they play more casual decks, and they rarely do well because they're not playing the meta decks. I don't know if that's intentional or if they just don't want to play the meta decks, but like something like Pulsemon. Like they're right now they're on Pulsemon and Eosmon, and bless their hearts, but they struggle. Like they are really struggling in order to actually be able to take games. Like Pulsemon's not as bad as it thinks. It kind of feels like Galaxy Loop where you have just a lot of really stupid stuff. But this you're over like you're doing too many extra actions to lead to the same result as something that like as something as simple as what Fen just already is doing.
I mean, they have like really cool pieces, right? Like the interaction that exists with their SR rookie, where you just raise out with your BBmon underneath you, you pull in your Leon, and you gain 2 memory right there.
Oh, don't get me wrong, it's incredibly stupid. Like that's why it feels like Galaxy. Because it's just like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm going to de-digivolve myself with the option card, put it into security, then digivolve again into another Digimon for basically free, and then I get to do it again to just recover myself up to
Yeah,
3
the
that
the
way.
problem is that it feels like you're spinning your wheels without like really getting anywhere. Because like aside from like your cool megas, like you don't really have so much going on.
And that's kind of where I was getting at, where it's just like there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of really cool decks, but it feels like a lot of them just spin their wheels doing nothing, or if they are doing something, there's already a deck doing what it's doing, but better. Granted, Eosmon's a little bit in a different position because it's trying to be Tamer Hate, but the fact that like there's a lot of decks that just, yeah, go ahead, let me play my Tamers for free. That's the big mistake. And like the best thing about the new Aosmon stuff is actually the level 5 that de-digivolves, because de-digivolve is incredibly strong and incredibly annoying, but against some of the top decks, like they just don't care because they either can reestablish if you do tear them down, or they never built up to begin with, and the only time they're actually going to be like throwing hands at you is when they're winning the game.
New new Baumon is just like, oh, I was de-digivolved. Cool. I'll just get my when digivolving back. You know, that thing that's actually like the best part of my deck on my level 6s, because I can just tuck a tamer under there and go back into that same guy who's sitting in my trash right now.
Mm-hmm. The only thing
Exactly.
that's because I didn't know where the modification came for the replacement. You don't even get the draw, man. That's so sad. You don't get the draw.
Yeah, but this is like it harpens back to like what I was kind of saying with like EX6 meta, where the meta is still constricted just because of how powerful and how much the gap is between like literally the tier 1 and 2 decks and then everything else. Like it is kind of just that crazy. I think like in terms of some decks the gap is a little bit shorter than what people might be anticipating, because something like Shine is still incredibly strong, but it was only weak because of Magnemon's existence and the fact that it couldn't get over Magnemon. So now that Magnemon is obviously going to be less of a threat, that's going to change the meta dynamic to allow something like Shine to actually make a bigger comeback, especially now that he has an ace and some new tools to play with, to be able to actually have some slightly different gameplay patterns and adaptability to further enhance what the deck is even capable of, because they might be anticipating, oh, he's just going to be like generic Shine punch with Marcus, and then all of a sudden they slam down BT17 Shine Greymon, and then you basically can't deal with that Digimon, and now they're just sitting there ace baiting you, otherwise they're just going to be punching you in the face. So, like, it's I definitely think like because of less Nume and less Magna, the format becomes more open, but it becomes more open in favor of the already dumb decks that couldn't get around Magnamon, which is weird.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, sure, blue base Magna kind of got weaker, but it kind of didn't because it wasn't already using Awakening. It just means that you have to be more conscientious on how you use Flame Dramons, and maybe you change up your promo Flame Dramon ratio because obviously you're not running a lot of level 5s to be able to
Well, you
do
don't need it as much anymore, anyways, right? Because the reason you were playing that card was for Numemon.
that. That is true. Um, But yeah, that you were running it for Numemon, but it also helps burn security, so that way before Magna can check, um, it allows you to trigger Magna's ability.
Mm-hmm. Which is, a thing that deck was missing. But there was ways to finagle it into the blue base. But
Yeah, but it's just an alternative way. It's not a bad card. It
and
just
then
means that you
Armorvac
have to
is now
be
just like very high roll.
Yeah, you just have to be more conscientious because you can't Digivolve Flame Dramon into Magnamon X because you only have one Awakening. And I think, like,
Uh-huh.
overall with Magnamon, with Awakening being lessened, you also have to be more conscientious of your Magnamons because now you have a more finite number and you can't rely on, like, Awakening to pull it out of trash because it was checked in security or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, technically Magnamon got weaker, but because a lot of decks still just can't deal with Magnamon, um, like that's still an overlying issue that is not fully resolved, and that's why like I think a deck like Tyrant is probably going to still do okay. It has damage issues, which the promo Mega Kabuterimon kind of tries to help fix. Um, and the deck is still slow as molasses. It's a good control deck at locking the opponent out of playing the game. It just isn't actually winning because it needs to suspend its Digimon to try to remove something if it can't inherently just remove it. And so, like, it's a weird deck. But I don't necessarily think it's bad, and it's still like one of those like cornerstones where it's just like, okay, Magnamon X is lessened, so maybe Tyrant becomes more prominent just because, again, a lot of decks don't have the ability to deal with that type of protection.
Mm, I don't know. Like that's the issue is that like I felt like Tyrant was perfectly fine. Like he's situated well. Like his biggest issue is just that like he makes games take a long time because his problem is that he costs way too much. Like he's just so expensive. So like sure it doesn't matter because you have a Monzemon that lets you attack at the end of turn or whatever.
Yeah, the
And
Modimon.
like yeah, Monimon, sorry. And that like lets you like get stuff going to a degree, but like piercing's like a hot commodity to come by. Like you have to like really work to put it in the deck because the cards that give it are like frankly kind of bad aside from giving you piercing. But then piercing scares you because you're like, oh, if I lose this tyrant to a random security bomb, I kind of just don't have anything else.
Yeah, Tyrant still, like, don't get me wrong, Tyrant has its issues, but like something like Shine Greymon honestly can't beat Tyrant, which is like the really weird thing. But again, this is like tier 2 deck versus tier 2 deck. It's just like, does that actually matter? And like the big discussion that a lot of people care about is like, what is actually defining the tier 1? And I don't know how wide tier 1 is going to open up. Because before tier 1 last format was realistically like 6 decks, and maybe it'll open up to like 9 to 10 decks now. And I still think some of those decks from last format are obviously still going to be some of the stronger decks.
I think Armorvac, like, I don't really see much of a reason to play it, if I'm honest. Because I feel like you're so entirely high roll, and like to like actually be consistent and do kind of the same things you were doing before is much harder.
No, it is. And I think like people, like knowing people like as a whole, Not anyone specifically, just people in general. They don't want to put that much effort into it, so they would rather just give up the deck rather than try to adapt and actually find a successful formula and put in that testing. Some people will, but the vast majority won't. They'll just be like, cool, my deck got nerfed, let me move on to the next one. So, like, everyone just probably who was on Numemon probably is going to swap over to something like Ancient Guru because he wasn't really negatively impacted. He has a similar gameplay style, and he's one of the better decks, obviously, according to Japanese data. So it's just like, cool, I'm literally just going to be moving from tier 1 to tier 1 um, with not much consequence or thought into, um, the overall relearning and investment. It's just like, yeah, I'm just doing the same thing with a different deck.
Yeah, I think like Numemon's in a better spot. Like their hits realistically are less damaging because like Nume X kind of sucks that they hit it like mainly because like my issue was that I didn't want Nume X hit because I felt like it was the entire deck's like identity, whereas like Monze X just felt like an unnecessary like angry cherry on top of their Sunday.
Yes, I do think, like, literally because Nume X is gone, the deck has to make some dramatic changes to how it functions as a whole. Like, yes, there's replacement pieces that we could use that are in archetype and in engine, but it's not really just I have a level 4 Digifall for 0, draw a card, draw an extra card because of Sunemon, swing, it dies, play out platinum, go into level 7. Like, it's not doing that level of crazy and stupid. But, like, this is probably why a lot of people are speculating on Protoform right now, is because they're looking at utilizing other X antibody Digimon, possibly on the level 6s, to be able to try to make up for what we just literally lost and kind of shift the deck to be more of a control deck. So it's just like, okay, now I'm going to try to make my focus all about Manzemon X instead of Numemon X. So, like, our attention point is just changed. So maybe the new level 6 lineup is probably going to swap over from, like, Valk to maybe the Bunnies. So, like, you could run Cherubi X, or not Cherubi X. You could run Cherubi Ace, and then you could also run Rapid X. Because if you're already playing the Protos, you just like Proto, Rapid X, more DP minus, and then I still have like Edda instead of Edda Valk. It's just Edda into Cherubi. And then that facilitates what Manzemon X was already doing as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. There's
Like
a lot of like experimentation that has to be made, but I honestly don't think Numemon as a deck is dead. And unfortunately, I still think it's going to be one of the better decks still, even with the bans and limits.
I feel like it's not worth your fucking effort though. It's the same as like Armorvac, where it's like not really worth the effort anymore to me personally. Because like
I think it
I
is just
do,
because it now is like actually a different deck. Like it's still the
I
same
guess
deck, but it's different at the same time.
like it feels like with like I said, Numex being like the whole like identity of the deck, that it just makes it so much harder to like justify playing this deck, specifically this deck. Whereas like you could just take a lot of the like guiding principles in it and build a better control shell that's like more interesting. So like I don't know that you'd even call it still like Numemon, like, or that you care. Like,
I don't know.
and that's kind of where I'm at.
I don't exactly know what it's going to look like, but I'm not going to be writing off, like, in quotation marks, Numemon Manzemon as a deck. I think it's still going to be a really strong deck. It's probably going to be in the upper tier 2 echelon just because it might have some issues because now it's not being a deck that's farming Magnamon because there's less Magnamon because there's an entirely less Magnamon deck. And then because of that, the protection, the like literally just the amount of protection kind of starts going down, and like there's there's just a lot of like stack building damage out of nowhere shenanigans that's probably going to ensue in its place. Either that or just literally hybrids out of nowhere too. So like that's kind of the
Yeah.
direction that I feel like the meta is going to try to shift to. And right now, obviously, blue is like one of the better colors, and it's always been one of the better colors that fits in that mold. Which is probably why a lot of people just wanted Mirage hit. Um,
Mm-hmm.
on top of that deck literally being like good for more than a year at this point. Like it's actually astonishing because I have the data on it where it's like, yeah, he's always been in like the top 3 since BT17.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, since getting his burst mode.
Yeah. Like that burst mode really turned the deck online, and the fact that like the interesting thing about Mirage is like the fact that it's slowly becoming less Mirage and just generic good stuff that sometimes is Gao focused. Because it's
Mm-hmm.
like they're playing
Well,
the
he's just an entire
Hankumon.
brick house. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they're
He
playing
does
like
everything you need him to.
yeah, they're playing not all Gao low ends. They're playing like Gao level 4s because those are actually some of the best level 4s for the deck. But they're playing like alternative level 5s like Zudo Ace, Hankumon, and then like you have a little bit of room for a couple of mocks. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like it's definitely a deck that's like trying to evolve past what Gao is as like a supposed archetype. And I think that's the issue that people are taking problem with. And I think that's like a big shift in the game is like it seems like Digimon as a whole is trying to be less archetypical and more package based, like almost taking the Yu-Gi-Oh pages. As much as I hate saying that, I absolutely hate saying that, but like they really do feel like they're trying to Yu-Gi-Oh it, where it's like, yeah, so you just run the Uko package combined with the Nume package and then whatever level 6s you feel like, and then boom, your deck is done. So like you're just running like small little engines that make the deck able to do what it needs to do, and then just play whatever kind of top end just fits what the deck is trying to do. Like it's weird. Like Digimon deck building right now is probably in its weirdest spot that it's ever been in.
Well, I
Yeah.
think it correlates to like the fact that Galaxy is just like a really strong engine that can facilitate like you can basically play any deck using it that is red or blue because like the problem is just that Johnny Bandai doesn't give you enough parts to make a lot of decks when you first get like your cool mega.
Yeah.
Like just having an entire like archetype that builds your entire deck for you up to the mega that you want to play so that you can play that mega for like as cheap as possible and as quickly as possible like is pretty appealing. And that's why we see that like Hexa used it, Mirage uses it, the Dragon Links used it since they evolve off of Reds. So like Dragon Links had like a small stat where they were like winning like locals and like smaller events, right? Like they never like did anything too crazy, but still, there's another deck doing stuff
Yeah, and that's
using that
kind of
engine.
yeah, and that's kind of like the analysis that I made where it's just like they there's just a small core that is letting like it's like I'm going to use whatever level 3s, 4s and potentially 5s that I want that's going to set myself up for then whatever non-related level 6 to come in and just use. So it's just trying to be as efficient as it possibly can, and the trade-off is you're not archetypical, which is generally what Digimon wants because there's a lot of cards that relate to archetypes, but at the same time, who cares if you just get up into your level 6 and your level 6 is just good enough? And like that was the big problem with Jet Sylphimon, was it borderline cannibalized yellow as a whole because there was absolutely no better strategy than let me just play yellow hybrids, go up into whatever is the best level 6 at the time, and then call it a day. And honestly, if Jet Sylphy still was at 4, Yellow would just still basically be choosing between the Patamon vaccine engine, which again, that's another engine. There's so many yellow vaccine stuff that it just naturally works, and even if it doesn't, we could still force it to work anyway. Because again, we could just digivolve all the way up into whatever heck level 5 we want, and then just use the stupid option to go into whatever level 6 basically. Because almost every good level 6 is also a vaccine, so it's not mechanically, it doesn't make it doesn't matter if you're trying to recover, discard, or trash or whatever. It's all vaccines. And I think that would be fighting yellow. Like if yellow hybrids was left alone, that would be fighting against yellow hybrids, where I just evo I evo all the way up into my level 6 in a single turn still, and it's still almost the same memory count, which is the weird thing. I think yellow hybrids at this point is a little bit more expensive, but
it depended entirely on the top end piece, because
yeah,
right,
because you would just
vaccine giving you the ability to evo for 1 into any level 6 that's a yellow vaccine, is pretty crazy.
yeah, because actually, honestly, if yellow hybrids was left alone, they could honestly just also use that option to just evo for 1 into whatever level 6. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's still an absolutely cracked engine, and that's partially why Jet Sylphie needed to go. But that's honestly the direction I feel like Digimon as a whole is headed, because we're seeing this with a whole bunch of other decks. We were talking a lot about Dexter Goremon on how he has purple and black, and it's just yeah, but the purple is still just kind of an engine. The black is actually trying to be the deck it's supposed to be, and the purple is yeah, they all are just SOC traits, and this is just the faster engine.
Well, the black gives you the thing that you kind of are missing, which is piercing, so that collision's cool
Good.
and it's doing damage, yeah. And then it also is giving you protection from everything that your dexes don't protect you from.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, people are playing purple because it's faster. That's strictly the reason why people are playing purple.
Well, they're playing it. It's not faster per se. It's
easier.
that it's easier because you have no hard decisions to make, because everything that you put in the trash you can use. So
yeah.
at no point you have to be oh man, I really actually don't want to discard any of these parts. In purple, you can be I couldn't care less. I can throw anything in the trash and it doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
And that's really the difference. Is that there's another thing where Nikki's really bad about it, where he'll sit down, he'll get his hand, and he'll look at these tamers and be oh man, these cost too much, I don't want to put this down. And then that'll cost him the game because he just didn't develop the tamer ever.
I mean, the only time you could, not to cut you off, Nikki, the only time you could really develop a tamer, if your deck doesn't have the ability to just play one reasonably, is in the early stages of the game. If you're an Imperial player, you have to literally turn 1. It's not bad to just hard slam your tamer if you know you're going to be able to use it.
I want to chip in here just for a second, because I'm so happy about the new the new champions that we're getting. The new trend of, if you have 1 or less, play a tamer. We couldn't have that off the off the bat, man. That can you imagine all those mem setters you could have put down just because 1 or other, if I have 1 or less tamer in name.
Yeah.
I like that design change.
Because it still allows them, because I think the big thing when it comes to deck building that they noticed is the play a tamer for free started becoming less and less useful, because it's diminishing returns, because most of the time that's the only thing the card is doing. So if you already have your tamer up and that's the only thing the card is doing outside of its inheritable, why are we using it? And those types of cards became ran at less numbers as a result.
Exactly.
But I think because going back to the subtopic on packages, looking at Ancient just as another top contending deck, even his stuff is literally just an engine. It's like he requires 2 Koji Tamers. Technically, you only need 1, but 2 Koji Tamers. If you have any
If
more, that's
that, because
great.
you don't care, right? Because what your pieces care about is each other, right? So like
Yeah,
kendos get you lobos, and lobos care that you're on top of a kendo. They don't care that you're on top of your correct tamer. So like
yeah. So the
you can
Tamers don't
technically
even
take
matter.
that package anywhere. Yeah, like as long as because they can only go on yellow tamers, so you can take it into any like yellow deck, but like yellow doesn't have like interesting tamers that are gonna like be doing a lot while staying unsuspended. So
Well,
it's
that's
kind of
why
whatever.
Ancient Gabu Bond was a deck, is because it
Mm-hmm.
literally is just like, oh, I just play Gabu Bond, and then I also just so happen to have Ancient
Happen to
because
have the ancient Garu package because you can just be like, oh, one of those are sitting in my hand. I'll play my option that only cares that I have a tamer.
yeah. And I think like even though Louis got hit for and technically Hammerspark, Louis and Hammerspark got hit, which does impact the speed of the Ancient Garu with Gabu Bond. I'll just label it as like Ancient Bond. Um, as Ancient Bond, like you kind of still just do the same thing. It's just you don't have the ability to like pull the Digimon out of raising to be able to immediately aggress. So they slowed that aspect of the deck down, but it could still like dump damage just because doing that once, reset, do it again the next turn, like means that once you're all set up, you're probably only 2 turns away from like winning the game, if not 1 turn away from winning the game.
Mhm.
I want to mention that both like packages are just like strong in general, right? Like Gabu Bond like was a meta contender like OTK deck, and now you just have like a way to like stave off damage because if they're one stack, Ancient Garu just outs it and also is like doing damage
Yeah, it
the entire
makes
time.
yeah, it's a highly versatile, like, and that's what's really strong about Ancient Garu is the fact that like if they are that one stack deck and that stack doesn't have the proper protections, Ancient Garu literally just comes in, outs them for free, and then sets you up for whatever your follow up is, which is the crazy
Mm-hmm.
part. And the fact that it is like a 2 to 3 card package is what's extra crazy about it, because who knows what other applications that we could find for that type of package. And Red technically has the same type of spiel. It's not necessarily as flexible, but it's still relatively strong.
I think it's better though because Red has better generic tamers, like that can just kind of sit there and be unsuspended to use, or like has more impactful tamers, right? Like Yellow just doesn't really have that many good tamers.
Well, so you with Gabu bonds, you're not necessarily utilizing the other two to warp. You're not using the BT17 cards to warp. You're using the promo to warp. So like you have that shift in package that just is better suited for the deck, and that's kind of where you have the flexibility between the different colors to run this type of package. Like who's to say that Numemon can't just magically find a yellow package that it could run with and then just play Ancient, because why not?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because like I feel like though like Agumon would be better because at least then like you can convert those tie tamers into you actually using your hybrids.
Yes, but
But it's the draw power, right? It's the difference in draw power that the
yeah,
Gabus
I was
give.
gonna
Even
say
though like
that
Red gives a lot.
Reddit's got some good draw power. Don't get me wrong, but I honestly think like also the slight style difference between the ancients is also different, because like
Mm-hmm.
straight up deleting stuff isn't necessarily as good because it's easier to out and enables more strategies. Like, oh, I wanted my Digimon to die, cool, where bouncing is just right now stronger.
Right.
The only thing that it's weak to is partition, and realistically there's only one partition deck, and that's Imperial. And like that's
Mm-hmm.
where Imperial just becomes like really strong, like because if Imperial's up against other blue decks and Imperial just sits on a level 5, blue decks cannot handle it. Like, it's honestly that sad to where it's just like, if we're looking at the top 4 decks being like 3 blue decks and Fen, like Imperial kind of just wins most of those, which is like where people are thinking that Imperial is probably going to be the best deck, because it's just like, oh yeah, it's able to beat all of the other tier 1 decks while still being able to beat all of the other tier 2 decks.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this meta is definitely in a weird spot. I think the game is just going to be in a really weird spot. This is why I kind of just wish more was kind of hit, just to like really shake up the game more than it did. Because, like I said, I watched Mario's video on, like, it's labeled RIP Digimon, if anyone's like interested. He got the title from a comment. He doesn't actually think Digimon is dying, but he's not necessarily the happiest with the current state of the game. And like, after taking a look at the ban restriction list, taking a step back, thinking about things a little bit more critically, like, I do think that this ban restriction list, while it was a pretty big one, it was kind of just a big slap on the wrist more than let's actually address problems. And that's the unfortunate reality of like what this meta is going to lead towards. And we already know that EX7 really isn't going to be fixing the meta. It's just introducing Mother Shoto combo, and that's basically it in terms of meta relevancy.
Trying to think.
I mean,
think yeah,
you
that's
get
about
the
it,
puppet,
right?
yeah, you get
You
the
get puppet
Liberator
stuff that
stuff.
like, well, the puppet stuff only does anything to help Jessmon. So like Jessmon sees a little bump, but Jessmon's like goofy and like has issues because it can't really use the trainings very well, especially if
No.
you're at with your whites and your now shiny new yellow cards.
Yeah, and that's like we said, the problem with like single stack decks. If you just can't use the training cards, you're just actually not a real deck.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're trying to get around it by the fact that you're like Sistermons are letting you, like you're cheating out Sistermons that are letting you cheat up your stack, but like it's not
you
always
also play
enough.
the Master to Disciple, which is a shittier training card because you're just evil by 1.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Because like
Otherwise,
EX7,
EX7.
Zephaga, which is sort of a real deck, and then Three Muskets, which is sort of a real deck.
Three Muskets is
They
an
don't have any
EX7.
like real.
Is
They are
Three
EX7s.
Muskets EX7?
Yeah, they
Yes,
are.
they are.
I've
It's
just
VV
never
stuff.
seen any Japanese results of it.
No,
So
It's
yeah, they
Mimi.
don't have much going on.
Because again,
And Nature's Spirits is also not a real deck at all.
Yeah. So Three Muskets falls into it wants to be a stack deck, but it plays out of the breeding area. But you have different colors, so once again, nice trainings, fuck ass. Good luck using them. Nature Spirits is mainly just get to lock and then spit out bodies and pray to God.
yeah.
Yeah, you're do nothing bodies that, you know, it took you a bit to get there anyways. Yeah, it kind of sucks.
Yeah, like a lot of EX7 doesn't feel like it's going to be doing much of anything literally outside of
Hexablow
showing.
himself is super great.
Hexablow's in the set,
Like,
yeah.
Hexablow's super great. Like, him just existing, like, he gives you another sick piece for, like, Blue Galaxy. You can do Red Galaxy and do the Dragon Links, and the Dragon Links aren't bad. Like, they have pretty good effects.
Yeah, it's just overall meta relevancy. I don't necessarily see them doing that well, because like Galaxy, it's in the same camp of like, I'm doing too much to the point where I'm overcomplicating things, and it's just easier to run a simpler deck, even if the highs aren't necessarily as high as what it could be running the Galaxy package. It's just,
I did feel when I did Galaxy Mirage that I felt like I was a stronger version of base Mirage.
you did or didn't?
I did feel that I was stronger. Like, I think that my run only got, like, messed up by me running into the, like, legitimately worst matchups being, like, Bunnies and Demon Lords. Like, had I not ran into those, like, every other, like, game, and, like, in half of the games that I did, because, like, I took most games to, like, 3, right? Like, it was pretty good.
Yeah. Like, I'm not saying, like, it's not good, because, like, Digimon, unfortunately, is still very matchup heavy. Like, that's just an unfortunate side effect of just how the game has developed. Because, yeah, like, there's just certain matchups that are just really bad. Again, like, that's why everyone's thinking Imperial is going to be the best deck of the format, is because the other best decks are all blue decks, and blue decks do not have an answer to Partition because, like, what? They bounce the level 5, Partition breaks, they don't have the ability to get rid of the level 4s, and then they just
You'd
DNA
have to be
again.
playing Source Strip to break Partition.
Right,
So,
which
like,
most
Zudo
other
still
blue decks
exists,
aren't
but,
doing.
like, you're just having a hard time. Like, it's really just Mirage that has room to play Zudo right now. Like, Magna can play it, and maybe it plays a couple copies more because, but Blue Magnet doesn't care because they just Evil for 5 into their guy. And
Yeah, they
there's
try
no
not to
other,
care.
like, blue source strip right now. Like, it'll be Hexablau later on will do it, and he's pretty cool. Like, and I have fun with the pure version of it that I built, but, like, he's definitely, like, a piece that, just be another good guy for putting at the top of Galaxy.
Yeah. But it'll be interesting to see what actually develops. Based on some of the early, like, pre-ban and restriction lists, Ancient Garu is obviously going to be, like, really strong. And then there's just going to be, like, the menagerie of, like, just other good decks. I'm not saying, like, Ancient's going to, like, be the best deck. It's going to be one of the better ones. But, yeah, I don't know. I'm not saying like I'm getting like sick and tired of the game. It's just I kind of do agree with like Mario's sentiment where it's just like there's a lot of very clear issues to where it's impacting my overall fun and enjoyment of the game, but like I still love the game at the end of the day. I'm not giving up on it. Like I'm going to go to
I
nationals.
I do feel like there are some, like, clear issues where, like, certain like, a lot of new cards just, like, don't have the sauce. Like, I feel like they built a couple, like, needlessly strong guys that are still, like, propping everything up, like, which is what I had talked about in our podcast about, like, desired bans and restrictions, where I felt like they needed to do more to be like there has to be a better reason for me to ever want to play some of these new pieces, like, aside from them being new pieces of cardboard. But, like, at the end of the day, I already don't buy everything in this card game anyways. Like, you have to be smart with your money, and, like, you can, like, see spoiler season, you can look at cards and be like, this really isn't better than anything I already have. Like, there's no
Well,
reason for me to do it.
yeah, and I think
So
honestly, like, and I've said this multiple times before, and I'll keep repeating it because I honestly feel like it's a true statement. Block 3 feels incredibly scuffed as a block because, like, this is probably the most power crept block we've ever had. And, like, now seeing Block 4 kind of just try to not be as stupid as Block 3 really goes to show how stupid of a Block 3 was. Like, the power gap and jump between Block 2 and Block 3 was actually this large. And, like, it's not unusual for games like this type with no rotation to have basically a softer waterfall rotation where it's like the new stuff is generally better. But it feels like this is their attempt to try to put everything back at like BT13 power level, where it's just like, yeah, we understand this should be the high, and even though that bar is obviously raised and this ban and restriction list didn't lower that bar at all, it just kept the bar the same. Who knows? Maybe in the next ban and restriction list, more problematic cards from Block 3 are going to end up getting hit in some capacity to try to actually bring the game down in power to where Block 4 wants it to be.
well, that's the other thing is that, like, this ban and restriction list wasn't for JP,
It kind of
and
was.
I think well, I think that the issue was is that they didn't want a repeat of we're gonna hit a guy who's, like, coming out in a set, even if we gave you time to, like, play it for, like, a weekend or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, they did that, and then that drastically impacted the set's performance. But I mean, that guy was a secret rare in the set, so, like, that is a determining factor as well.
Yeah,
But I don't think
you're not
because
wrong.
there's new cards that you could have hit that are like doing shit in Japan that like is slightly problematic, but they just decided they didn't care. Like, so I feel like to me this did sell me on the fact that Johnny Bandai does care more about EN
I mean, it
than
makes
it does
sense
about
considering
JP.
we make more like sales for Digimon than Japan does. So like it would make sense that this kind of shows that they do care more about EN than JP. Not saying that they don't care about JP because they make everything easy, especially after listening to East and kind of hearing his perspective. They make things, if you're in Japan, as easy as humanly possible to be able to get cards. Like, it's ridiculously easy to be a Digimon player in Japan. But if you're a JP player not in Japan, then things could get a little bit more dicey just because distribution issues are still a thing. Shocker, it's not just Latin America and UK. Like, it's other places too in the Asian area. Then they also have like card acquisition issues and like Bandai Premium issues. Like there's a lot of other issues if you're not a not in Japan as a Japanese player. Like Japanese meta player. My bad.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of feels
Yeah.
that way like for English as well, where it's just like obviously the US is the big central hub for Digimon, and we've rarely had distribution issues. We still get them, it's just a lot less frequent because they put more time and attention into it. And I don't even know how the other countries' distribution networks even operate. I'm not going to begin to guess that. But I think like we have some pretty okay distribution chains. Not saying that they don't in other areas, just saying that I think that we have a good one. That, but there's lots of different factors into that. But yeah, I do feel
Mm-hmm.
like they do care a lot about English, and like you said, maybe that's why they didn't want to go heavier, is because they don't want to try to kneecap themselves too much.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so overall,
I'm looking forward to some aspects of this new format. Like, I'm glad Numemon's like a little metered down. Like, that's nice. Like, Tech was annoying. Um, you know, I just do want to see like bigger variants, but like I don't know like how much I think it matters because I do feel like certain decks are just really strong and they don't have like clear easy counters. Like the Johnny Bandai, please give us floodgates for all of the colors, and it'd be nice if they could just be like random loser Digimon that aren't gonna like get archetypes where they're like randomly good.
yeah, like Cutemon.
Like, yeah, more Cutemon, I guess, and more Pillowmon, because
Well, Pillow's a
kind of
vaccine. Well, Cute's
BS.
also a vaccine.
Yeah, they're just incidentally vaccines, right? Of course, just fine for whatever. Yellow, just that's their identity, I guess. That's all they do, right? But like, was it necessary that like Chumon and Carriermon just happened to be like the floodgate for memory? Like, and actually have like legitimate decks that like care about that name?
Yeah,
Seems
I don't know.
unnecessary.
I mean, we got Zenimon to kind of act as like the new Chumon.
Yeah, but that color already had one. Like, why did they get another one? You know, other colors don't have those.
I think it's because they wanted to like you said, because the names like give them
Mm-hmm.
one that wasn't name locked and had like
Yeah,
more on par stats, so it didn't get
because
outed easier. But
we
I
need
feel yeah.
more of the can't play by effect guys, because we have 3 of them.
Yeah, like all the issues that the game has aside, I think that Digimon is still in a good spot. I'm excited to see where BT17 is going to end up being, even though EX 7 is right around the
7 is like
corner.
really close. Yeah.
Yeah, I honestly think that's just another nothing burger of a set. It's cool. don't get me wrong, it's another EX set, makes the game more accessible, especially with starter decks, which I'm always a fan of. It's just, in the grand scheme of things, if you're trying to be hardcore, like extra sweaty, the set is just a giant nothing burger. So, like, and because of that, the meta that we're going to be finding ourselves in is going to be the one that's going to be persisting through November.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just something I wanted to put into perspective on why evaluating the meta for where it is right now and what it's going to turn into is super important, because this is what we're going to be doing all the way until November, when we get the next proper set, which is Special Booster 2.0.
Right, that'll give us all of 18 and then like
Half
of 19.
Yeah.
It should be all of 18.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's all of
18 and half of 19.
half of 19.
So fucking weird, because it's like half of 19. Like
Yeah,
what? Like what do they? Do they just say, "Hey, you have everything up to champion. Everything else, you gotta wait 6 months."
Well,
No,
I
so-
think what it does is it lets you finish certain decks, like Royal Base. I think is confirmed to be in that first one. Like we'll get everything for Royal Base.
Yeah, I mean, that would make...
I think the only thing that we maybe don't get is that new Fun Bee that they just revealed. Maybe like, because I feel like all these new 19 pieces are part of like what's going to end up being in the other half.
Yeah, I don't think we know exactly. I could be wrong, and I could have just overglossed like a distributor thing. We don't know exactly, but like something like that would make like a lot of sense, where it's just like, it would be nice to have just, all of Fambimon and the Royal Base Liberator stuff be together. It would make so much sense, and it would make another, again, ease of access for like, oh, I could just buy the set and I actually have a deck I can make out of the set. Like that's a huge aspect to something that's very clearly lacking in a lot of Digimon sets, and some of the more popular and better ones are obviously the ones that you could actually build stuff out of. Like that's why BT13 was so successful, that's why BT12 was so successful, and that's why some of like the stronger EX sets are successful.
Why is he pure? Why is the new monitor rookie pure black?
Because
why is it on deletion?
Because
add one with Night or Twilight and place one under Tamers, reboot, and Heritable.
Yeah, just because.
Like it's not. It's good because if you like it's with the Uko strategy of just like I put out my rookie and then it dies in security. It's a blocker. I'm just like the inheritable is a slap in the face because you're never putting this under anything.
Yeah,
the only target this has is like BT7 Nightmon.
Yeah, because I think like Digimon's designs in Block 4, because that's the next block we're going to be going into, even though they're like powered down, I think they're doing an overall better job at designing the game. So like just seeing all of the spoilers for Block 4, knowing what's coming up in Special Booster 2.0 and 2.5, it gives me hope that the game is going to get into a better state, even if it might not be the greatest now.
The biggest problem though is that like we've been talking about, like Block 3 is like super strong, like, and we're eternal formats, so like how do we get all these strong cards out of the meta so that these clearly weaker cards can like actually see success?
Yeah. I mean, so like if anything, to kind of like wrap this episode up, like if anything, it just goes to show that they need to do a better job at managing their like ban and restriction list. And like it was interesting seeing out of left field Hammerspark get hit. But like that kind of shows like where the game has evolved from, to the point where for 3 years Hammerspark was fine and then now Hammerspark is not. So like what actually is going to be on the table in terms of some of the older cards when it comes to like just zero cost options, or just weird and odd synergies that they didn't exactly anticipate, like with Saya and Co, the blue tamer. I think that tamer is incredibly dumb. Like that card honestly is almost at this point so problematic because of the style of ability it is, to just straight up get rid of it. Because as a Galaxy Loop person, you're barely using it as is for its intended purpose, if you're even using it at all.
So in in like most of the Galaxy builds, you don't even play that guy. That guy's a loser.
Yeah,
Because
so
it's only usable for you to do like Grace Nova,
yeah,
or for you to develop some kind of weird degenerate combination. So like the deck doesn't even need it.
exactly. So that's kind of where I think that the game can do better is just banning and limiting more things to actually let, like you said, let these lesser decks be able to breathe. On top of like, okay, maybe certain decks have been performing a little bit too strong. How do they actually reasonably manage them? Because I do like what you kind of said, and after seeing like the Magic's recent ban and restriction update, because they had an emergency one because a lot of their formats were bad, and they basically said a giant oopsies. They were just like, "Yep, we admit that our current cycle did not work. We're going to be changing how our cycle works," and like they're actually taking a little bit more active steps to make their game a little bit better. So why can't Bandai not necessarily copy them, but follow that same type of suit where it's just like, okay, a little bit more attention wouldn't kill them.
The problem with that is the fact that it's Bondi. They're more concerned about the money, and they have been since, well, they've been a video game company over a card game company.
Yeah, I mean, money's always going to be an aspect, but just a little bit more attention. Because I honestly do think like we get more frequent bans and updates than like some of their other games.
I think
And
so too. I think One Piece like very rarely gets stuff. They get like emergency shit because like this thing has been in the meta and is the entirety of the meta pie. But
yeah,
I
but that's
think
because
like
One
the
Piece I think is like just worse designed in general. Like that game has a good solid foundation, but has been absolutely poorly designed literally since the beginning.
well there's like big negative conceits that like I'll give you, but like I think the main thing is that like that game's kind of cool because like there's never a turn where you feel like shitty because your opponent handed you one memory and you have no fucking way to like get back in the game. Like you're always guaranteed to have what you're supposed to have. Like
Yeah.
unless you did something to remove your own Dawn or like your opponent did because like even your opponent removing Dawn, it costs them Dawn and all it does is slow you down like ever so slightly. Like it moves you from like odds to evens or evens to odds, you know? So like that's the one thing that I did like about playing that card game was that like I felt like
Yeah,
I
there
was
were no
always like escalating.
downturns. Yeah,
Yeah, and there was
there
never like a spot where like I was like, cool, like I could have literally done so much cool shit, but he gave me like one memory too few or whatever.
Yeah, but that's just the difference between the games. But I honestly think like literally after like looking at Eggman events, because I do all the data is there. I just look at some
hmm
of the other games out of curiosity, and like their metas are generally awful. Like they will have for every 3 bad metas, 1 good meta. And Digimon
Yeah.
is the exact opposite. We have 1 bad meta for every 2 good metas.
I do feel though that like them being leader based card games like also just hurts their decks in general. Like so like the meta share looks a lot worse because it's all the same guy, like completely. Or
Yeah,
and there could be like the smallest like little bits of like variance here or there, like 1 or 2 card difference, like which you can already see like with our stuff. But like at least things look better because like the headliners for decks are like more varied with how it works, as opposed to like oh right now the meta says that the only viable red leader is this guy. So if you want to play this color, you're all this guy.
it, I mean,
Whereas like it's
Yeah.
kind of that, but like we have more guys that you can be playing. Like and there are opportunities to be like, oh, I'm gonna play this rogue guy. Whereas like One Piece and Dragon Ball Z like kind of don't have that. Like
yeah, and
right
I
now,
think,
like all of their color identity is a guy.
and I honestly think like that comes down to what we were kind of alluding to earlier, where like it seems like they want to design around packages and engines rather than archetypes, but those packages and engines are archetypes themselves. So like it really puts Digimon in a really weird position. And I don't know if it's exactly for the better or for the worse. I kind of think it personally. I think it's for the worst, but I'm not
There's
Papa
some
Bandai, and I
merit
can't
to
see the
it.
future.
There's some merit to it because it does mean, like I said, that like certain like new cards like make it. Like Hexablamon makes it into like some topping lists. Whereas like if he was just playing his like actual like family line, he doesn't have it. Like he just isn't there. Like and that sucks because he's a good card. But like without like Galaxy to like lift him up and like actually let you play that card, like you'd never even know that that guy was good. Like, you know?
I mean, I've seen some
And
like
that's
Mirage decks use it, so like, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
because, like,
And
if
as
we
far as
could
the
be allowed to play
leader-based
some of these
format
decks,
that,
What?
as far as the leader-based format that Headless was mentioning, they did have a kind of starter up with that, with the chosen one format that they originally started with, and then decided to scrap.
They never did that. That was
So
all fan made,
I
and
don't
I
know. They
hated it. Like I'm
Uh,
gonna be completely
doesn't
blunt.
matter.
Like Chosen Ones is
It
like
was
a fan made format that's supposed to copy Commander, and like Commander is like obviously like where a lot of this like leader kind of stuff, not necessarily stemmed from, but it caused the idea to form. And like after playing a crap ton of Commander, and playing a lot of other games and
everyone.
looking at a lot of games, it seems like a better idea from the onset, but it's not necessarily the end all be all.
well,
No,
the
it
the
could
only reason that
be a nice
works is
thing for
that
Bondo to do.
Commander works because you have like 20 plus years of cards to look back at and build a 100 card deck out of.
Yeah.
Like, but it doesn't even matter anymore because
Bro, they only
Commanders.
go back like 10 years.
No,
Most
no, no,
Commander
no.
decks.
You're lying. Stop, stop. You're lying. There are some completely busted ass cards that people are playing from like OG shit.
Yeah, but that's because Magic's power balance was different because of rotation versus non-rotation. But
Exactly.
I
Which
think
which
we've
means
gotten
that you have
I don't like another
stuff
way that
protected,
you
correct?
correct the
But
game
yeah.
is just you start doing rotation.
I
uh
mean, that could be a way to like move sets and like whatnot. Like, to be honest, it doesn't make sense to me that like Bandai didn't do that. But the problem is that like they can't build decks and sets. Like, and that's their issue. Like, you'd have to start giving us much bigger sets, which maybe they'd be interested in doing. They already did up our like SR counts, right?
which
I
apparently
think they
according
lowered
to
the
East is
SR
going to go
count.
down
Okay.
because they
Which
realized in Block 3 that it really made things kind of screwy. So East said like as of like Block 4 after EX 7, it's supposed to go down. So it's
okay,
supposed to
so
be
they're
back
gonna put
to
it back to the
10 and
normal
back to
numbers.
normal. Yeah.
Okay. Which is better for the aspect of like collecting in the card game, like actually trying to get everything. Because when there was like the like 12 or whatever nonsense SRs we were at, like it was really hard to actually like pull stuff
Yeah.
It's
with
why
more
Nasty Mountain
quantities.
stuff is so expensive, despite being one of the worst decks in the game.
Yeah. So I'm
Well,
gonna
that
dip
and
out for a
waifu.
bit. I need to go get some food.
Yeah,
Okay.
Take care, guys.
Mhm.
Bye-bye.
but yeah, I
That and
think
waifu tax.
yeah, but I think we kind of stalled ending for long enough and gotten way
Yeah.
too off track. Um, to reiterate and wrap things up, I think the game is going to be fine. This ban restriction list
I don't.
was good. It was for the most part what we wanted. It is going to have an impact on the game. Blue looks to be like it's going to be the best color again. But that's just because blue was never a bad color, but it was never the best color, which is weird.
hmm
Yeah.
But yeah, any other closing thoughts before we wrap this up? Not trying to get into any tangents.
No, I think that
That
after our
kind of throws
discussion,
me out.
Imperial I still think feels the strongest. Like I think it's a deck that just loses to itself.
Yeah, just not seeing your pieces in time is literally its
hmm
only weakness. Outside of that, it has
Yeah.
borderline an answer to everything.
hmm But
So
I look forward to seeing what happens, and hopefully everything's fun for us to play in the card game.
yeah. And at this point, I want to thank everyone for listening to this episode. I know this was kind of a longer one, and I know the quality of this episode was not exactly going to be the greatest or what you're used to. So again, I do apologize for that. And it really, I really do appreciate you. A, listening in general, and B, listening actually to the end, especially on some of these longer ones. I know there was a lot of like side tangents, and probably a lot of talk that just didn't matter. But at the end of the day, we're just here, just being a couple of guys, chilling, vibing, and just giving our thoughts and opinions on the game. So with that, I want to give everyone a big thank you again. Hopefully next week, as long as my power doesn't get turned off again due to storms, things should be back to normal. And I will see you all, or we will see you all later.